Whenever I say something about tarot cards, divination, or psychic abilities, there's always at least one person in my outer circle who's worried for my salvation. And it never fails. The topic of false prophets and worshiping idols comes up. There's a fear that surrounds the topic of mysticism and trusting your own intuition. And I know that the people I know have good intentions, even if they're misguided. Does this happen to you too? And if so, this message is for you. But first, let me introduce myself. If we've met before, welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Brandy Fleck. I'm a writer, artist, certified trauma-informed life coach, host of the top-rated Human Amplified podcast, where I interview lots of cool folks about the human condition and how to make it better, and also am currently being called to strengthen my intuitive abilities and share my experience and insights with you around that. So I'm answering that calling on this channel, and I'm excited to see where it takes us. If what I share here resonates, I'd appreciate if you'd hit that like button and leave me a kind comment. If it doesn't resonate, that's okay. Take what does and leave the rest. With that being said, full transparency, I am fairly new at channeling. I haven't done it very much up to this point, not intentionally anyways, I do know that I've channeled in the past when I've written certain articles for different publications. And when I was finished, I looked back on them and I was like, wow, how did I know to write that? As an example of when I've channeled unintentionally. But at this point, when I've channeled messages so far, it's typically been that I've been in deep contemplation and I ask a question. It could be to my spirit guides, my angels, my ancestors, the ascended masters, whoever's willing to answer. And then the information starts to flow into my mind or my knowing. I simply just become aware of the answer most times. Sometimes it comes in images to demonstrate a concept, but usually it's an idea that I can put into words. I often do that by writing down what comes up as it comes up, and that is how I channeled this message I'm going to give you today. And at this point in my spiritual journey and strengthening my intuitive abilities, I still don't know exactly who is who when my spiritual team is answering. I can sometimes tell the difference between angelic energy and ancestor energy, but not always. So I just want to be really upfront about that part of this. I can absolutely discern if the energy coming through is benevolent, kind, and loving, and I do only accept information from that type of energy at this point in time. Getting to know who my spirit guides are is a process I'm currently working on. So if you want to know how that goes, be sure to subscribe so we can learn together, because I'm sure I'll be posting more videos around that part of this journey. Now, again, the way I channeled this message about false prophets was exactly how I described it above, but I was intentional about directing the question to my spiritual team. I simply said in my mind, what is a false prophet? I asked this question because I don't believe psychics are the false prophets that Christianity refers to. Now, of course, not every psychic is going to necessarily be the most honest person. Not everybody who says they're a psychic is actually a psychic. Not everybody who's a real psychic is bad. There are always shades of gray, and I wanted answers around that because real psychics who are honest and genuine aren't bad people. Anyways, I digress. The information immediately started flowing into my consciousness as I asked that question to my spiritual team, and so I started writing it down. I was like typing it in the notes app on my phone, actually. So I did break in and out of flow a little bit during the time my spirit guides were answering, and so as I read you the message I wrote, I'll mention when I was co-creating with them versus when I was straight up channeling. And basically, as I was channeling, I would at times get intellectual about the information I was given and start to apply logic to it, because that's how my mind works. And that's where I started co-creating with them and analyzing what they were saying. But there were times in this message where I tried to do that and they simply took over anyways. It was a really interesting interaction, really high energy, and I was like buzzing. And as the information would come through, I became curious and asked other questions that kept the interaction going. So you'll hear those as I read through it all. Without further ado, here's the message. A false prophet is someone who uses what they call the truth to stay in power over you. A false prophet is someone and people who are disconnected from source and are living in distortions, fog, and lack clarity that source, God, Creator, brings. They seek to separate you from source as well because they need you to believe that you need them or their agenda in order to be safe. You can see examples of this in the history of the church and how religion has evolved. This diminishes your power as they drain you of it for their own usage. Because you have the right and capacity to have a direct relationship with Source in love and not fear, when you nurture that connection, your power grows. You tap into the real truth with clarity that only the light of God can provide. And once you've done that, the false prophet can no longer control you, which is his greatest fear. But it's not done in love and therefore is not the way. When you speak your truth, and the truth that comes from your direct connection with God, the false prophet will call you a false prophet. They will insist it's witchcraft or evil. This is gaslighting and manipulation. Call it out. Stand firm. Keep your faith. True evil will not prevail, for it cannot when light guides the way. That's why certain institutions and systems or parts of them, like the church, are starting to fall away. When you speak the real truth, you shine light. When someone speaks in fog and distortion, they spread darkness and call it the light. That is the difference. Shine bright. Whoa, right? So this is me talking right now. After I channeled that message, I was blown away. I was like, I don't talk like this. This is not coming from me. And it was really exciting. So then I decided to ask, what's the difference between spreading dark and shining light? Because there's a purpose to dark and light. And just because something's dark doesn't mean it's evil. So I wanted more information. So after I asked that question, I started rationalizing and applying some logic to what I thought about it. And I said, well, when you spread light, it can look like picking up a heavy rock that's been there for a while. When you do, there's no grass underneath it from where no light has reached. And as you lift the rock, the light starts to show you the dirt. And I was envisioning this in my mind. And this is where they basically took over the metaphor. And I was describing a vision that they added to. And so the rest of these words aren't mine. The exposed worms and bugs start to scatter because you've disturbed their home. They can't handle the sudden light shining down on them. You see them for what they are and how they've been living. This is, of course, a metaphor. They can't stay in the light, for darkness is where they must live according to nature. So they go find another rock and a lot of darkness. You must lift that rock too and keep lifting rocks until they're all overturned. That is what it means to shine your light. Practically, in real life, you do this by being your full self. You express yourself unapologetically and you accept yourself for who you are. You use and share your gifts with others, whether that's art, logic, building, fixing. Your talents are your gifts. What excites you and brings you joy are gifts. When a false prophet spreads darkness, it's like the worm or roly-poly saw a beautiful butterfly and thought, I want that for myself. How can I get that for myself? That becomes the agenda without regard for the butterfly. The false prophet then sets out to convince the butterfly it needs to live under the rock to avoid the pitfalls of the rain or elements. The butterfly knows deep within itself that it was created to live the way it naturally does, but the fear convinces the butterfly that it should listen to the false prophet, the worm. So the butterfly goes to the ground. It digs in hardship to get under the rock with the worm. It vanquishes. But the worm got to be close to the butterfly's beauty for a minute, and now it wants more. So it sets out in the same pattern it used to wear down and convince the first butterfly, and the cycle commences. Butterflies tell other butterflies of the great worm who is trying to save them and has the answer. It's not until a butterfly who stands up to the fear and says, this isn't right. We're meant to live in the light. And then she decides to honor her nature and fly in the sun and rest when it rains, even though the others are screaming at her to come with them. She's not listening. But to honor her nature feels easy, even if there's hardship. And she loves her nature. And when the others see that she's making it and thriving while they're killing themselves prematurely in hardship, they begin to slowly stop listening to the worm. And one by one, they return to their true nature, the light. And the cycle is broken. Oh my gosh. Okay. Really high frequencies in that. So then I sort of interjected with my thoughts to my guides, and I said in my head, the worm isn't inherently bad. It's the worm's actions toward the butterfly that are bad. There is a selfishness at the root of the worm's actions, emotional abuse tactics like coercion through fear and gaslighting to invalidate the butterfly's truth and reality. The force of evil is working through the worm's actions. It isn't who he is at his root. From a spiritual perspective, I've learned there isn't bad and good. These are human judgments to describe things or experiences we wish to avoid versus things or experiences we wish to have. They're helpful words to use in the context of this conversation, though, so we can discern the difference between light and dark, good and evil, how to follow the light versus stay shrouded in darkness. My clients often struggle with feeling like they're being selfish when they stand up for themselves or live life in a way that brings them joy while it brings pain to others. They ask, where is the line between selfishness and selflessness? So based on the information that just came through about false prophets, I think that we can identify this line and give ourselves some grace. And by the way, I'm like writing all of this down in the same note that I was channeling in. So the conversation was happening in my head, but also like was coming through on the paper. And so then I continued to say to my guides, and also as if I was talking to my clients, if you're worried about being selfish, odds are you're not. If the pain caused in others is because they can't get you to, and then at this exact moment they took over again. So now here's their words. They finished my sentence. They can't get you to believe like them or act how they want you to act or be how they want you to be. When what they want goes against your true nature, then they are the selfish ones who've made you believe you're the selfish one for not conforming, not listening, and not compromising your glorious, beautiful, source-given nature, which may be different from theirs by design. And it's very clear that our nature is to be connected to God. We are of God. We don't need a mediator. We don't need someone else to tell us what our nature is. If you feel out of control in your life, it may be because someone else is controlling you. This is control. Selfishness is control. Then I butted in and I said, for example, and I started thinking about it for a minute because I thought that an example would be helpful when giving this message. And then they sort of started co-creating with me. So then I said, and let's be clear here. Perhaps the person trying to control you isn't a bad person. This can be true, but that doesn't mean they haven't been controlled and that they haven't bought into the idea that they need to live under the rock with the worms. Maybe they're a butterfly choosing to live with the worms, and they believe that trying to control you like the worm has done to them is what's best for you. So their intentions are in the right place, but they've got it all wrong, because if they only knew, and then my guides completely took over and finished this sentence, if they only knew that the method of how they choose to express those intentions was harming you more than helping you, they'd stop. If they only knew that the methods of how they choose to express those intentions were harming themselves more than helping, they'd stop. But the worm knows the consequences of what he does and doesn't stop. That's the difference between evil and good. True selfishness is requiring someone or something to go against its nature. True selfishness is evil. For the worm to choose selflessness, he would need to choose to acknowledge that he wants to be close to the butterfly and that he may never be able to share the nature of the butterfly, and he would need to be okay with that. That is what letting go is. Acknowledgement and acceptance. Letting go is selflessness. And at that moment, because the butterfly is who she is, she may land by the rock and talk to him. Befriend him, and he gets to be close to the butterfly, and they both get to live in their own realities, in their own natures, uncompromised. Taking care of yourself, loving yourself, prioritizing your own well-being is not selfishness, it's self-love. And true self-love is to love and connect with God, which means to love and connect with your true nature that He so lovingly designed. Self-love and self-care are not selfish unless they seek to change the nature of someone else disguised as selflessness. Letting go is true selflessness, not in the literal sense. To be selfless in the way you use the word is to not be without self. In fact, in true selflessness, you are the most fully expanded within yourself. When you let go, all you truly have is yourself. And when yourself has been diminished through controlling power of others, we can see why that would be scary to let go. Because then what would you have? The answer is still yourself. You see, the way the usage of the words selfishness and selflessness have evolved reflects the distortions that have plagued this planet. It is important to remember that each one of us has the capacity to be the worm or the butterfly, and to make any of the various choices available to each. That is a topic or two for another day. Duality and free will. For now, simply remember that the capacity to be each is within us all, and that you get to choose which you are in any given moment. Pondering this will also build your capacity for compassion to self and others. Wow. That's it, guys. See you in the next video.